In-depth journalism in the Memphis community, the Daily Memphian is of Memphis, not just in Memphis, and seeks to tell the stories of this city. TheDailyMemphian.com. Truth in place.
Production funding for Behind the Headlines is made possible in part by the WKNO Production Fund, the WKNO Endowment Fund, and by viewers like you. Thank you.
Pre-K funding, XAI, and much more tonight on Behind the Headlines. I'm Eric Barnes with the Daily Memphian. Thanks for joining us. I am joined tonight by Roundtable of journalists talking about some of the biggest stories of the week. Kailynn Johnson is a reporter with the Memphis Flyer. Thanks for being here again.
Thank you for having me.
Sam Hardiman is a reporter with the Daily Memphian. Thanks for being here, Sam.
Hi, Eric.
And Bill Dries is a reporter with the Daily Memphian. We got a bunch to talk about as we get a few weeks into the new year. I think, Bill, we'll start on pre-K and the lack of funding and the holdup of pre-K funding from the county. And a few things against the backdrop, the city and county and local civic leaders have emphasized the need for universal pre-K for, I feel like, ever, but certainly for the last 10 to 15 years. Strickland was very much on board with this, the chamber. I mean, all people have said this. But now there's some thousands of seats at risk as the county holds up funding, and it's not exact funding to two outside entities. It's not exactly clear why. Give us the backdrop and where we are right now.
The backdrop is that Shelby County Mayor Lee Harris is less than a year left in his term of office, his 4-year term of office. So he's identified some priorities. One of those priorities is to adjust the county's contribution to the pre-K funding, which now comes from the city and county. He's specifically concerned that not enough of the money that the city and county put up together is going to the per-child cost of pre-K as administered by the nonprofit First Aid. So he's holding up funding to get a better accounting. First Aid, the nonprofit group, is saying this is a moving program. If you hold up funding, then you, in effect, endanger the program as it is, and we can talk about this, but don't stop the funding for it.
There's another nonprofit, right? Or First Aid then puts it through to other providers. Am I right about that? So Port Relief, people are familiar with some of their funding is at risk as a part of this. And
right.
Yes.
Port Relief is involved in the Head Start part of this as well. And I should point out that Laura Testino from the Daily Memphian has done much more detailed reporting on this.
All this, I don't know, Sam, if you want to chime in. I mean, the other backdrop to this is in the fall. The state comptroller's office said, "Hey, Shelby County, slow down on. We want you to pause on any borrowing. We want you to get some things, your house in order on your finances." Lee Harris on this show and elsewhere in the fall said, "Look, that was just an administrative. We need to file some reporting, give some more clarity. There's no financial problem." Other people are Shantae Avant, the head of the county commission, said there was a lot of questions to be answered when she was on the show some weeks ago to talk about the county finances. What's your take on all that?
Yeah, I mean, I think there are two things. That what was between the comptroller and the Shelby County government was administrative. They didn't file their budget with the comptroller in an appropriate amount of time. And so that impacted their ability to borrow in terms of having to secure permission for it. The county did secure a loan from its debt service reserve fund to make up cash flow this fall because of how Shelby County tax revenue, how it comes in and dribs and drabs and really starts coming in this time of year while the city of Memphis gets most of its property tax revenue in August. At the same time, with this pre-K fight, beyond whether or not Mayor Harris has established priorities, it's a matter of right now there's money that is supposed to be paying for pre-K seats that hasn't hit accounts. So there are pre-K seats at risk here. It's not up for debate, and it's a matter of does the city of Memphis pay its half of the portion if it doesn't have the same issues that Lee Harris has, or in something is worked out here? Because I think and at the same time we're talking about government here. Pre-K is supposed to be one of these things that government, as you pointed out, Eric, is supposed to be changing the outcomes of reading levels, of keeping kids on track, of making this place a more prosperous place, and that is what it's intended to do.
Bill, other thoughts? I mean, where does this go? These kind of fights happen. But, one of the things that's interesting, and Sam in some ways alluded to this, we talk about this debate, the politicians talk about this debate, but then their families got to make a plan. They got to know where their kids are going to be if they've got work. These organizations have to hire or not hire or retain or cover the costs of the teachers and the instructors and the staff. I mean, all that somehow gets disconnected when these fights happen this way and funding is delayed.
It does, because frankly, and very, very politically, that's when someone who wants to change it has the most leverage when that time element is involved. Yeah. Of course, the risk is you screw up a program just at the moment when parents really need it, and they can't make plans.
Yeah. Again, we'll be covering more of that. Laura Tessino, who can be here today, is on our staff, and others have been doing really good work on that and what's going to happen, because there is a deadline coming up. But we'll stay with education, and although this pre-K funding is not directly related to Memphis-Shelby County Schools, Memphis-Shelby County Schools is in the news. They're kind of always in the news as we record this on Thursday morning. Kailynn, you did some reporting on the voucher program. Talk about that, and we'll talk about some other things going on with the school system.
Yes, so a report coming from the state showed that those students enrolled in the voucher program are not doing as well as those enrolled in public schools or Memphis-Shelby County Schools or any of the other schools compared. In the state program, even though that most of that money was allotted to voucher school program funding as opposed to those public schools.
Yeah, and there's, again, Laura has done a ton of work on the people taking them. The program will expand again, I believe. Is that right, Bill? You checked me on that. This year, more people will be eligible. So they're pushing forward with this voucher program. Also in the news right now with Memphis-Shelby County Schools is Roderick Richmond, the current interim superintendent who we had on the show probably a month, 6 weeks ago, is up. The board has to make this decision, the school board, on whether he is the interim. Are they going to start a search? There was generally positive vibes, to use the term of art right now, that he might get extended. But that's also, and I'll ask you to chime in on this, Bill, against the backdrop of the legislature going into session, bringing back up this takeover bill, a bill very much led by Brent Taylor from Memphis, state senator, and Mark White from the Memphis area in the House. And it looks like they've reconciled their bills, and they are going to try to push it through probably early in the session, which just started.
Yeah, because it's going to be a quick legislative session, this being an election year. The school board basically has talked with Richmond, done some evaluation. They will take the vote on whether he remains and whether there's a more permanent status for him later on after this evaluation period. But aside from that, I think there has to be a discussion about what this state legislation means. What is, whoever the superintendent is, what are they governing? What are they not governing? What does the board control? And what does it not control in all of this?
Well, I mean, I think it's clear that the board, if this change goes forward, they would have the right to hire or fire a superintendent. So it would be very strange. It seems, just on sitting kind of somewhat on the outside here, why would you go ahead and hire a person or start a search? Who would want to apply for a job where the board that's hiring you and running the search might be essentially rendered, if not meaningless, but much of its power stripped away. And we've already had, I can't remember, what's the number, six superintendents and interim superintendents over the last decade or something like that. So it remains to be seen. We will have State Senator Brent Taylor will be on the show next week. We'll probably have at least one or two other legislators on with him. And we had Ramesh Akbari, the state Democratic minority leader, on the show 2 weeks ago, something like that, and talked about some of these issues. So maybe we stick with, I don't know if anyone wants to take this, the legislature being in session. One of the things they came forward with was a whole lot of immigration laws that they want to pass in line with kind of what we're seeing from the federal government and what we're seeing with ICE. Anyone want to chime in?
They've actually referred to these as having a rather solid link to the White House. Tennessee's not the only state that is considering this particular package of immigration laws.
Yeah.
So
we'll see on that. Sam, I mentioned ICE, the task force. Somewhere in the holidays, I think you and Aaron Fleming did a big breakdown, got a ton of data, which has been, whatever you think about the task force, the lack of data and transparency on what I think should be frustrating and a question mark for everyone. I mean, these are our tax dollars, what's going on in our community, whether you like it or not. Right? I mean, we should be able to sort of point to it either as a success or a failure or whatever it is. Talk a little bit about what you found. Again, it's back on Daily Memphian, but some of the stuff that you guys found when you were able to go day by day for multiple months of the types of arrests and activities.
Yeah, so Aaron did a great job in obtaining, a bunch of the situation reports, which are the daily reports that are sent out to a whole slew of people, federal, state, local law enforcement, about what the task force did the previous day or the previous days. And we had them for about a 8-10 week period. And, that essentially gave you an accounting of every person the Memphis Safe Task Force said they arrested. And so what we did is we went and looked for the immigration-related arrests, which are a significant amount of the arrests. They're not the majority, not even close, but they're a significant amount of arrests. And we looked at how those arrests were conducted. And what is very clear is that there was a pattern of behavior of people who are Hispanic, who appeared to be Hispanic, getting pulled over in a traffic stop for some sort of motor violation. It's often not clear what the motor violation was. It was a busted taillight, failing to, use your blinker, whatever it was. And then, somehow they were found to be undocumented and they were arrested for being unlawfully present in the United States. And so that, on the backdrop of this, legislation that's coming down the pipe in Nashville that, is, as we've seen for years and years, that there has been kind of a national blueprint for legislation, conservative legislation that is the topic in vogue of the moment, and then a bunch of laws get passed. This year is sort of now immigration. It's coming more fervently from the White House. There's been reported in Nashville reports that Stephen Miller, the president's deputy chief of staff, national security, et cetera, has advised on this. And so, what we've seen here in Memphis is hundreds of people in Memphis were arrested and charged with being lawfully present just by driving their cars. That's what we know.
Any thoughts, Kailynn, on the task force generally, or sort of what you guys have been reporting on in terms of what you found?
Yes, so we spoke to a few advocates who are actually concerned about the data as well, basically saying that there's not enough data after what happens with these arrests to basically tout how effective that task force is.
Yeah, we had an op-ed from former sheriff, former county mayor Mark Luttrell, and the pastor at his church. They work with Afghan refugees who are here, a lot of political asylum from outcomes of the Afghan war, and who've been picked up. I mean, they talk, very substantiate the story. It's in the Daily Memphian of this family of 4 being picked up. They're not quite sure where they are, probably in a detention facility, another person being picked up. So it's a very scary time. We've had advocates on, we've had folks on who are happy with what's going on with the task force. I don't know, Bill, thoughts, and maybe we even segue into the upcoming election with this.
Yeah, one note on the immigration laws. You will remember that Tennessee, the Lee administration, actually has what amounts to an immigration department as part of state government, which was kind of along with the leading edge here shortly after the task force was announced for the city to be here as a presence. The other thing is that the pledge or the outline of what would happen with immigration here is that these would be people who would be, quote unquote, the worst of the worst in the country illegally, wanted for major crimes, for felonies. And that's not what this has turned out to be in Memphis. It's turned out to be traffic stops on technicalities that are leading to some serious action against these individuals who are taken immediately out of the city, away from their family. Where they're taken, it's not clear, at least in the beginning of this, if ever. And it's raised some real questions about due process.
Yeah. We'll talk more about these with issues with Senator Brent Taylor. We've talked to, I think, it was last spring when we had now former Shelby County Republican Chair Worth Morgan, former city councilman, who said, look, we welcome all these. This was before the task force, but there was the crackdown that the Trump administration put in place. And he and others have said, we welcome this. We welcome these people are not here with proper documentation, and so they should be removed. And so we'll continue to cover that and talk to people about the complications of that. Let's talk a little bit about politics, and maybe we start with there's a new chair of the Republican Party, Shelby County Republican Party locally, and talk about a little bit more as we move to the filing deadlines for the many positions that are up for election and the various election cycles that are coming up this year.
Well, the good news is it's not a big ballot year. You don't have all of the judicial races on the ballot, but you do have...
Only Bill Dries could say, seriously, this is not a big ballot.
Yes.
By your standards, I agree.
Although you do have 5 special judicial races, but that's another story. Yes, Rachel Wall, who was the first vice chair of the local GOP, was elected as the new chairman. Worth Morgan resigned as chairman to devote more attention to his wife's recovery from cancer. Rachel Wall has done politics for a living in other places. As a matter of fact, she worked on the staffs of House Speaker Newt Gingrich and his successor, Dennis Hastert. Also worked on a lot of campaigns in Collierville. And one of the most noticeable absences in the campaign season so far is that there is no name Republican contender in the Republican primary for Shelby County mayor. Wall says that is going to happen, that they're talking to candidates, and that in a few weeks we should see someone running in the primary to carry that banner for the party.
Meanwhile, there are approximately 250 candidates on the Democratic side.
Just 8.
Just 8.
Just 8
feels like
so
250
far.
Based on my inbox.
Yeah.
When is the county mayor, the primary election? Let's go through some of these logistics.
The county primaries are on the May 5th ballot. Okay. The deadline for the candidates in those races to file is noon, February 19th.
Okay. So we'll do a rundown in Daily Memphian and here, and we've talked a bit about trying to get some forums and debates between folks as we go forward. Let's kind of quickly run through the sheriff. The sheriff race is kind of coming through as expected. Is that right?
Yeah.
And that's going to be a big one given the focus on crime, the focus on the jail alone.
Right. You have 2 contenders who have filed, Brad Liss and Marco Yagares, in the Republican primary. You have a lot more contenders with petitions out in the primary for sheriff. You have one who has filed, that is the Chief Deputy Anthony Buckner, who is probably considered the front runner for the Democratic nomination, although he will have lots of competition.
Let's do one more. Steve Cohen, who the longtime Democrat for the U.S. House seat here, Justin Pearson, who's the state rep, who's been on the show and talked about this. He is running against him. But there's another person joining the race who declared this past week or two, Devontae Hill.
Devontae Hill, who was probably best known from leading some protest during the George Floyd incident in 2020, and a somewhat controversial figure among the organizers of various protests 5 years ago for his rapport with the police department and his work with the police department during that. But these are the August state and federal primaries. The deadline on that is March 10th. So a lot of action to come in that.
I mentioned Justin Pearson, and one place where people know Justin Pearson and his brother and other activists, and you wrote about this, Kailynn, is the whole debate and the controversy around the XAI facilities. Now 3 of them that have been built or being built, and especially the gas turbines that have been used. Justin Pearson and others had a press conference earlier this week. Talk about what you heard there. We'll get Sam in, who's been doing a lot of reporting on this as well.
Yes, so in light of the EPA's recent mandate that gas turbines do need a permit, even the temporary ones, Justin Pearson, along with other environmental advocates, are asking not only for apologies be extended on behalf of South Memphis residents, as they say that what they have been touting for so long has been true. They're also asking for the Shelby County Health Department to comply with what they say is federal law.
So, Sam, you've done extensive reporting on this. These gas turbines are controversial nationally, as these data centers, which have so much power, and you'll correct me where I get things wrong, but incredible power needs, often the local grids don't have the capacity. George, I mean, there's just been some really great reporting nationally, and you've encompassed some of that in your reporting locally, that this is not unique to Memphis, right? That there are concerns about the power demands, and then these gas turbines come in. For many people in the business community side, the growth of data center side, these gas turbines are gold. I mean, these are the things you want because you can get them in quickly, you can get them up to speed, you can power your data center without having to wait for the grid and getting connected and all those kind of limitations. But again, they've been very controversial here from the beginning of the talk of these plants and the use of them. So give us the lay of the land of the importance of these gas turbines, which sounds super wonky, but they're a huge part of the growth of data centers in this country, probably around the world.
Yeah, I mean, so most of the power that XAI gets today at all of its Memphis facilities largely does not come from the grid. It comes from power it generates, which is largely from these natural gas turbines that then are used in conjunction with Tesla Megapacks. There are hundreds of batteries that XAI uses to then power its data center operations and the controversial chatbot Grok, et cetera. First of all, I want to say something about like the EPA and what it has said about natural gas turbines. It's not really clear if you read those regulations what has actually happened and what the changes are. It's pretty complicated, and some people have said that, in the Southern Environmental Law Center, Representative Pearson have said that the health department needs to follow the law. Right now, XAI is following the law. Right now, XAI has an air emissions permit for the turbines it has in Memphis, Tennessee. What we're talking about in terms of turbines not having permits in the past is what happened with XAI running natural gas turbines without a permit from probably June of 24 to July of 2025. Yeah. That's what we're talking about. That's in the past. What is not clear is what Mississippi is going to do about it, because XAI is running dozens of natural gas turbines in South Haven, Mississippi right now without a natural gas permit. Mississippi Department of Environmental Quality regulators have signed off on that. We've had it in writing. We've printed it in the Daily Memphian. It's not clear what Mississippi's doing about this. Yeah. And that's the real rub in terms of what the EPA has done. In terms of the broader structure, this is XAI is doing something that is honestly seen as innovative. While everyone here deals with the real-world consequences of this, because you're affected by turbines when they're backyard. You're affected by the emissions that come from them, what emission controls are on them. It depends. And then you have the noise, because they are jet engines, essentially, right? And that's going to affect neighbors' quality of life. But on the broader sense, XAI is the people that's jumped in the front of the line and in the AI race and have grown in the AI race with ChatGPT, with Meta, with Google, because they've been able to scale so quickly. And the reason they've been able to do that are these turbines. And so everyone else in the marketplace looks at XAI and what they've done in Memphis, Tennessee, and is like, whoa, this is wild.
There's also huge questions, and I should say we're taping this Thursday morning, predictions of a big, perhaps massive storm. We don't know what sort of power outages and water hits and all that kind of stuff. But that has been also, again, I'm speculating because we don't know what kind of storm impact we'll have. But that's been a concern people have had, that if these data centers put a big strain on the grid at a time when the grid has the strains of a massive storm or a heat wave in the summer. So some people, ignoring pollution, ignoring neighbors, ignoring noise, will say, well, these gas turbines are great because they don't impact the grid that could cause businesses and people to be out. I mean, it is a complicated puzzle to say.
Right. Well, first, the grid has to have reliability for regular people first. It doesn't, it can't prioritize a data center over regular people. And so, yes, absolutely. But also, what XAI is doing is essentially made their own power grid. It's a private power grid. Yeah. That's what they have in two places, essentially. And they rely on Memphis Light Gas and Water at their Memphis facility and on Paul R. Lowry Road quite a bit. But in these times of high stress, those batteries that they have are capable of powering everything and them coming completely off the grid.
Just a couple minutes left. Let me go to another, and I think you just alluded to this. XAI has been in the news. Grok, which is the name of its AI model, was essentially allowing people, and this is kind of graphic here, so I'll take a beat, to create deepfake nudes, to go to a picture on Twitter, on X it's called now, and make that person naked. I mean, it's pretty, and accusations, and really not even just accusations, you could see young people. It was quite disturbing. They have since they've limited access to this feature. It's still arguably still there, according to many journalists in the tech world. It's just behind a paywall. And it creates, it's a real, not to make it about us in the news, but we had a column about it. I think you touched on it. We had an AP story from the Associated Press about it. There are controversial things that happen on and within data centers. And it does sort of create this it affects the world. It's in this case based in Memphis, and what we cover and don't cover. It gets into these quandaries because it's new to us. Like, what do you cut? If an illegal activity passes through the airport or an airplane on the airport, we don't write about it every time. If that illegal activity is sanctioned and supported by the airport or an airline, we would probably write about it. But it creates all these interesting, at least for me and probably people watching this on a wonky Friday night, what we cover and what we don't about XAI.
Yeah, I mean, first, like, I think it's fair for us journalists to say that, like, non-consensual child porn is gross and reprehensible, right? At the same time, like, Grok has been anti-Semitic in the past. Like, there have been flaws with the large language model that people have exploited to do these things. And that happens, and there have been cases of ChatGPT advising people to do things it shouldn't do, right? Like all these large language models come with this. There's a tremendous amount of coverage of this one because it's pretty reprehensible, child porn, and then it's also Elon Musk, who courts his own controversy. Our job is, and this is where I say my job as a reporter is my job is to cover the facts of what's happening in Memphis, Tennessee. Just because the thing that is making the child porn exists in Memphis, Tennessee, it's not necessarily. What am I adding to the national conversation? What am I adding to the conversation? We've pulled AP Wire on it, and I think that's what we can do.
It's a big conversation. We had a guest column from a local tech writer, who kind of talked about it. Bill Dries from the Daily Memphian. Let's start. Pre-K funding from the county, essentially from the county and city, is in limbo right now. Some millions of dollars and some thousands of pre-K seats. Mayor Lee Harris, County Mayor Lee Harris, has said he doesn't want to release that funding. Why and what is going on here?
The mayor has said that in the 8 months or so that he has left in his second consecutive term of office, that he wants more of the local government funding to go to the per pupil cost for pre-K under the goal of universal pre-K. Yeah. And that not enough of the money that the city and county send to First Aid is getting into the classroom. Yeah. So he's called for an accounting. Meanwhile, First Aid is saying this is an ongoing program, and parents are making plans on this. And while we can discuss it, we really need to have the money in the bank in order to continue doing this in some form.
The other backdrop of this is, and we've written about it extensively, but we'll just touch on here, is the state comptroller in the fall said, hey, Shelby County, we want you to take a break on new borrowing. Some have argued that was really just an administrative, they needed some paperwork and some budget filings. Lee Harris has said that on this show. Others have said, well, is there a cash problem? The cash in the county coffers got pretty low in the fall, which happens every year because of the cycle of property tax revenue coming in. But there's much more to come on that we will be covering, both on the pre-K question and just the county finance part. But let me bring in Kailynn Johnson from the Memphis Flyer. And you've been doing some reporting on the voucher program, the state voucher program that allows families to take state money and use them at private schools. What did you find?
Yes, so the state actually found that while the enrollment has increased for those voucher programs, the students aren't doing as well as those not enrolled in that program when they're looking at TCAP and other achievement scores.
Yeah. Also in the Memphis-Shelby County Schools, which are very much in the news, next week the board will make a decision on whether they want to launch a search for a permanent superintendent. Right now, Roderick Richmond is the interim. The board has said very positive things, all in all, about Roderick Richmond. But it's also, there's a backdrop of the state legislature is in session. State Senator Brent Taylor, local State Senator Brent Taylor, and State House member Mark White have reconciled a bill that would essentially take over the local school system and render bill. I mean, there would still be an elected Memphis-Shelby County School Board, but the real power at the board level would reside with this new appointed board over it. So, to all kinds of decisions, why would the school board launch a search for a superintendent, one could argue, when that decision in the end really could come down to this new board come summer?
And why would someone apply for that job knowing the possible limitations on it? We should point out that while Taylor and White appear to have reconciled their differences, there are still some questions in the legislature about this bill from legislators from other parts of the state who are falling along some traditional lines on this, and that is what does this mean for schools in my district?
Yeah. In general, the legislature is pretty fine with, a takeover of
if it's the other guy,
of the big
problem.
cities or of just Shelby County
right.
or just national, but not necessarily all of them. And we talked a bit with Ramesh Akbari, the Democratic Senate Minority Leader, a week ago. People can get that show at WKNO.org or get it as a podcast wherever you get your podcasts. And we've got Brent Taylor, State Senator, coming up, and probably some other legislators next week. So we'll talk about that and other issues. The other thing in the news this week. XAI, the big data centers, there are now 3 of them in the Memphis area. Kailynn, you're writing about the folks, Justin Pearson, very much at the front of this, but other activists have been fighting these, especially the use of gas turbines and the permitting. There was a somewhat confusing, but some doubt cast on the viability of those permits. But tell us what you found.
Yes, so the environmental groups, along with State Rep. Justin Pearson, in the wake of the EPA announcement that those turbines do need a permit, whether they're temporary or not, they're asking for an apology to be extended to the residents of South Memphis and for the Shelby County Health Department and other agencies to, what they say, follow what is now federal law.
Yeah. That is enough. We don't have enough time to go through all that stuff, and we had other things we were going to get to, but we are out of time. Thanks very much for joining us. Thank you all for being here. If you missed any of the show today, you can get the full episode online at WKNO.org, the Daily Memphian YouTube, or you can download the full podcast of the show wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks very much, and we'll see you next week.